Today is Thursday, June 29th, 2023. My name is Judy Herrera, and I'm in Camarillo, California. It is my honor and pleasure to interview Ann Pedone on behalf of the Conejo Valley Chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, and Colonial Dames 17th Century for the Veterans History Project with the Library of Congress. This interview is being recorded by Ed Lynch from Advana Videography and contains the reflections and memories of the veterans during her time in the Army. This is Ann's story. Ann, you were the youngest of 3 children born to Italian immigrants Anthony and Grace Pedone. Your dad served in the U.S. Army in France in World War I, so it was no surprise that when World War II broke out, both your older brothers enlisted. William would rise in rank to colonel. Sadly, Stephen would die in a plane crash at 19. You had graduated from Davis High School in 1943. You had volunteered during high school as a nurse's aide and always wanted to be a nurse. Do you want to pick up your story there?
Yes. Since my brother knew I wanted to be a nurse, he was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He decided he would try and get me into the St. Anthony School of Nursing there. So he did, and I got accepted. So I went from New York down to Oklahoma to St. Anthony School of Nursing. And there I did a 3-year term of to get your registered nursing. But the last 6 months, the government came along. They had what they called cadet nurses. And they were military. They had their own uniform. And so I joined the cadet nurses, and they sent me to Beaumont, Texas to work at the hospital that had enlisted men and officers who were suffering from tuberculosis. So they were being treated for tuberculosis, and I was there for 6 months. And then I graduated from St. Anthony School of Nursing, and I decided, what am I going to do? I didn't want to go into private practice. I was interested in joining the service, so which I did. I became a nurse, and
An Army nurse.
Army
right?
nurse,
Yep.
and my rank, as you win, was a 2nd lieutenant. And they sent me down to El Paso, Texas, where I got my basic training, where how to salute, how to shoot, how to what you do in the service, what you're required to do, all those things that the Army has to teach you. And I was there for about almost 2 months, I believe, when they transferred me to Fort Dix, New Jersey. Now that was a hospital where the soldiers were sent overseas, so they needed their physicals and all their shots before they went overseas. And then we also got the young men that came back from overseas, casualties that had to be treated. And
This is World War II.
From World War II, yeah.
Right.
And so I worked on the ward, treating these young men, probably 4, 5, 6 months. And it was a little hard for me because I was a young Italian girl and I didn't do much socializing. And these were young boys who would joke and kid with you. I put up with it, but then I decided that there was an opening came on the OB ward, obstetric ward, and they needed a nurse. So I transferred in the same hospital from the one ward to the OB ward. And there I worked all the time I was in the Army. While I was there, I met my husband. He was studying to be a pilot, and so we finally got engaged. To surprise me, we went to the Empire State Building, to the top floor to have dinner, and he comes out and says, "Will you marry me?" And
Aw.
of course I said yes.
That's so romantic.
So
And your parents, so you're at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and your parents are in Mount Vernon, New York. So
yes, they're in Mount Vernon, New York.
So would you go
both
home?
Italians? No. My mother, can I tell a little about that?
Sure.
My mother went to night school to learn how to read, because in Italy, when they lived there, they worked on the farm. They didn't go to the schools.
Right.
So she was pretty much educated. But my father, being masculine, Italian, he decided he didn't need it, so he never learned how to read. So I don't know how he ever got a driver's license, but he did. But they remained in New York, and they didn't travel that much.
So would you, when you were at Fort Dix, would you go home? Would you go visit family?
No. Oh, when I was at Fort Dix, yes. Every once in a while, I would buy something from the commissary for them and take the train home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The train.
And I'd spend a couple of nights there, and then I'd come back to Fort Dix. While at Fort Dix, too, I was picked to do advertising for the nurses. This radio station wanted two nurses to come in and talk about what really nurses do and how they're treated in the Army and how they can upgrade their education through the Army. And like I say, I was picked as one of them, and we went into New York and did this TV station, which turned out really nice. A nice surprise to me, too.
Oh, good.
Anyway, my husband finally got notice to be transferred to Fort Still, Oklahoma. He was going to become a liaison pilot.
So were you still in the Army, or did you?
I was still in the
Okay.
in the Army, yes.
Okay.
When he got his order to be transferred. Okay, can you stop right there?
Sure.
Because did I tell you I got married?
Yeah, you did. You just said you got married, but I didn't remember if you were still in the Army or not at that time.
I was in the Army when
Okay.
I got married.
Okay. Yes.
And then after a couple of months, I got pregnant.
Okay.
And so that I had to get out.
Yeah.
And he was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to study to become a liaison pilot. So I eventually went down, and we got a house outside of Fort Sill, and that's where I gave birth to Laura. Okay, she's my first child. And we were there for a while, and my husband graduated as a liaison pilot, and he had to take parachute training, too.
Oh, gosh.
He wanted to be a paratrooper. But at that time, one day I get, they transferred him from Fort Sill to Randolph Field, Texas, for his next training.
And the family wasn't allowed to come.
No, the family wasn't allowed to come because they figured the young guys have to concentrate on learning and having to take care of family and children. So one day I get a phone call from the Red Cross saying your husband is in the hospital. He has pneumonia, and we'd like to let you know so you can come down and visit him. Well, anyway, I took a plane with Laura, took her down with me, and got to Randolph Field, Texas. That was quite a job because I really never traveled that much, and getting on a plane with a small child and landing in Texas and nobody to meet me,
Oh.
and finally got out to the base, They put me in one of the officers' quarters for the night.
Okay.
Okay, the next morning I get up and they take me to the hospital. In those days, the hospital was 2 levels. It was like a motel type where they had a patio outside the room all the way down. And so that's when I found out that he had cancer of the lungs and the heart and the brain. And he was 23 years old, and they didn't give him much time to live. So they were nice enough to let me stay. They put a bed outside my room, and they got me a crib for Laura to stay. So I was there, probably 2-3 weeks next to him. But then they were going to transfer him to Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. For more experimental information, but he got to the point where he just couldn't, he went down so fast that I had to call my mother to come from New York down to Fort Sill to take care of Laura so I can help take care of my husband on the base. Eventually he died.
So sorry.
And then I flew home to New York with my mother and Laura and I for the funeral that was going to be held at Arlington Cemetery, which I attended. And they gave him a nice formal burial. They had the horses pulling the cart and his casket put on the cart, and it takes the horses down to the area where he's to be buried, and that was very. I'm trying to think of a good word. Very not exciting, but heartwarming to see this being happen. And then they have the gun salute, which is nice. And then they hand you the flag, fold the flag and give it to you. Okay, and we have him buried. So then I went back to Mount Vernon with my mother and Laura and stayed there for about, a couple of months. Meanwhile, my brother, the colonel, was sent overseas to Italy to work with NATO. He and his wife. He was a full colonel, and his wife was an air evacuation nurse. They were both stationed in England together, and she did lots of air evac with wounded soldiers, transferred them from England to the States back and forth. Anyway, he knew what problems I was having at home, so he thought the best thing to do was to go overseas and live with them in Italy, which I thought was great. So he made arrangements for me to get on this special flight. The plane was, as I know, was assigned to General Slater, and he was stationed there in NATO's too. But his daughter was coming over, and part of his crew was coming over. That's why the plane was in New York. So I got to get on the plane, and we flew to
Azores?
Azores. Okay. And there we spent the night. And from the Azores, we went to Casablanca. And from Casablanca, we flew into Italy. And the funny thing was, while we was ready to land in Italy, the captain comes back to the ship and says, "Does anybody speak Italian?" And so I said, "Yes." And he says, "Well, there's no one in the airport there to tell us how to get down. Can you come and translate it? And I thought, well, I got to land, so I went up front and I translated the speed, the depth, and all of that so that we could land this plane, which we did. And when I got there, I said to my brother, you mean nobody's there to meet the general's plane? That was surprising. Anyway, I lived with him for a while, and he had a secretary, and his name was Richard Smith, and he worked for my brother. And somehow we got to meet each other, and I guess we became compatible, that I married Richard in Italy.
Okay, and he was a staff sergeant at the base.
He was
there.
a staff sergeant, and he was my brother's secretary, as they called it.
And we need to back up just a tad, because
Okay.
when Douglas had passed, you had found out also that you were pregnant, right?
Oh, I forgot. Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Go back to when I was taking care of him in the hospital. I'm sorry. I was pregnant. I was 6 months pregnant when I was taking care of him. So when I went home to live with my mother, I was about 7.5, almost 8 months pregnant. And so some problems arose between my mother and father. Is that the way I put it? My
Yeah,
mother and
that's
father.
fine. Sure, that's fine.
That caused me to have premature baby. He was born that night. He was a month and a half premature.
Mm.
So he stayed in the hospital for about a month, and they discharged him. And that's when my brother had the idea of my going overseas with Laura and the baby and living with them. So I got overseas, and the first week I was there, we set up a crib for the baby, and everything went well until one morning I got up to feed the baby, and he wasn't breathing. So I tried to give him resuscitation, but it didn't work. So my brother and I jumped in the car trying to find a hospital. Well, when you're new in the area, you don't think about what hospital you're going to go to. So he was pronounced dead when we finally found the hospital. And he was flown back to New York, Arlington Cemetery, and he's buried there with his father in Arlington Cemetery.
And you too will be buried there.
And
when you
I will
pass.
be buried there with them, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's when I began to meet Richard, my husband. He was introduced to me by my brother. And we got married in Florence, Italy. The funny thing is you have to go to a liquor store and buy a stamp to put on your papers to make it legal.
Oh.
And we went into City Hall, and that's where we got married, was in City Hall. And that was very interesting, I would say, because afterwards they give you this big bunch, what am I thinking of?
Bundle?
Flowers,
Oh.
bouquet of flowers.
Oh,
I said,
lovely.
thank you.
Oh.
And that was really something. Anyway, after that we went to his colonel's home that was living in Florence, and we had the Catholic ceremony held there. Okay.
Yeah.
While I was there, I volunteered helping the American school children with the immunizations and other little things that they might need. So I kept busy that way. And then I became pregnant with Richard, my first boy, and he was born in Italy, in Afragola. at that time, the United States didn't have a hospital there, so you had to go to an Italian hospital,
Oh.
which was in Africa, and he was born there. And after my husband's term with NATO was over, we came back to Alexandria, Virginia. And we lived in Alexandria, Virginia for a while. And my second son was born there at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And we continued with military life. And then we moved to New York, Long Island, and my third son was born there, Anthony. And we lived there, and there used to be a base. I can't remember the name, I'm sorry. It was an Air Force base there on Long Island. And after a while, they decided to close it, and so we got transferred to Japan. And we went to Japan and lived in Japan for quite a while. There I assisted, we lived in Fuchu Air Base. And there I helped with we had a big hospital in Tachikawa for the American soldiers and their families. And so I would volunteer there to help with immunizations and any kind of treatments that they might need in my spare time, which was very important to me. And then other times I worked at the Montessori training school for young children. And I managed to keep busy.
Okay, and you were also a senior Girl Scout leader, too, at this time. So.
And also I was a senior Girl Scout leader, and I had 12 girls, 12 seniors, which we did a lot of camping. It was nice that we could go to different military bases, and the government would set up tents for us, so we would camp on the different bases. And we did different things, like we learned how to cook spaghetti at Japanese style and all. But the most important thing was the Girl Scouts in California were having a jamboree. And we decided our troop had to be represented as senior scouts in Japan. So we decided we would climb Mount Fuji. And we did, and what you do is at the beginning of the trail, you get this pole. And what happens is they have 4 different levels. Each level you stop and you rest. You drink, if it's winter, you have hot soup. If it's summer, you have a cold drink. And they stamp the pole that you've been to that level. And so this goes on for the next 5 levels. And when you get to the top, they put a flag on top of the pole, okay? And so what you do is they have this level platform, because it's nighttime. By the time you start in the morning, it's nighttime up at the top. And you lay parallel right on the boards there, and they give you a blanket and you sleep, because the most important thing is getting up in the morning at sunrise and seeing the sunrise and all the mountains in the country. That was beautiful. But then going down, you go down a different way. You go down the back, and they call it the slide. And what it is, your feet slide as you go down. Oh. It's not a steeper, but that's what you do, and that takes about 3 hours, okay? So the Air Force took the pole and they mailed it for us back to California for the Girl Scouts. Okay, I'm thinking, what do I do next? Oh.
And then you also,
also while I was there, I got pregnant with my 4th boy, Billy, and we were stationed at Fuchu Air Base, so they had a hospital there, which I gave birth to Billy. So he was teased about being a little Japanese boy when he came back to the States. Okay, we were there for 4 years, did a lot of traveling. Oh, the Olympics came over in 1964, and we're nice enough. We had a potluck on the base, and we had the whole group of American
The athletes came?
athletes come over to the base and join us for the potluck, which was very nice. And besides, we got a couple of free tickets so we could go to the Olympics
Nice.
too. And also, they offered us each household could take. They had this little package of the gold, the silver, and the bronze medals put in a little packet for the 1994 Olympics. So each family could buy one. And so I bought one, and I still have it here, which was very nice. And then
One of your girls had an appendix attack. Did you want to tell us a little about that story? She had appendicitis. And
while I was there, we decided that the Japanese Girl Scout wanted to learn what the American Girl Scout did. So they invited us up in the mountains in the country to spend a week with them. And there we taught them how to take a can, the big can, how to make pancakes, how to make a candle, first of all, to put it under the can so you could cook pancakes or eggs on the top. That was one thing. And then the next thing we taught them how to make an oven with the aluminum foil to reflect the heat so that you could bake cakes. And then the other thing, we taught them how to cook in the ground and cover that. So in return, they taught us how to use bamboo, because stateside bamboo was tabooed for us because it blew up. But the Japanese Girl Scouts taught us that you have to make little notches at the end where the knot is, and then you can use it. And they could put together a little kitchen for cooking everything in a matter of 15 minutes.
Wow.
And that was very surprising. Well, while we were up there, one of the my little Girl Scouts got sick. So I had to take her down to the city to the doctor. And he said that she had appendicitis and she had to have surgery. Well, naturally, I couldn't listen to surgery because I don't have permission from the parents. So naturally, I called my brother that was stationed there also. He said, what you have to do, you can't let them touch her. You will have to come and pick her up. And I said, well, they don't have an airstrip. He says, well, we'll send a helicopter over. You get 4 or 5 Japanese people, get their cars put in a circle and have them put the lights on. And then the helicopter could fly over and knows where it is and come down, which they did. They flew down, picked up the young lady, and took her back home. And there she had a surgery. Lucky for her, but I was kind of ousted out of the city because they thought that I didn't believe in Japanese doctors, but that wasn't the point. The point was I had to get permission from the parents. But all went well, so we went back up and we finished enjoying the week with the Japanese Girl Scouts, and we came back to the base.
Good.
Okay.
And then your husband gets transferred back to the United States. He's going to get discharged, or
my husband gets transferred back to the States, and since he's from California, we came back to California. At that time, I believe the name of the field in Camarillo was Mitchell Field. I don't remember the name of the field, but that's where he was stationed.
Right here, yeah.
There. And so he was due to be discharged, so he went up to Travis Air Force Base, and there he got discharged. And he came back. So we decided, what are we going to do? And we thought, well, we had all this furniture and packages sent from Japan here, and we decided, let's put it in the garage and put a sign saying somebody, we're having a sale. Well, it went so good, everything disappeared. We made such a good profit, we decided, let's go into the used furniture business. And that's how we got started. We got a store in Saracoy. And there we set
Can you get
up.
a sense of the time period? About what year is this now? That your husband Richard retired and you are in Saracoy. Is it like 60? I wrote down 65.
It had to be around 68 or 69 at that time.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it's about that time.
Okay.
We had to use furniture, and we took in washing machines and refrigerators and you name it. But then somebody brought this table in that had different legs, and I couldn't figure out what the legs were. So I went to the library and I got this book out, and I brought it home and started reading. Oh, that's Queen Anne legs, okay. So we started taking in antiques, and we had quite a few antiques.
Nice.
And we did this for quite a while. I was the one that ran to the garage sales and picked up all the little goodies that we were going to sell, and my husband and his sister stayed in the store. And it was funny because the Saracoy Bridge went out, and you couldn't get to Saracoy from LA Avenue. You had to come all the way in to Camarillo to go across to get to the store. So there for a while we had no business until we rebuilt the bridge. Well, it got, where am I at now?
Well, at some point you're going to get divorced and move to Ventura.
In 1970, I believe, can't remember, I decided there was time for me to get a divorce and do something else in life than just being a mother. And I wanted to go back to work, which I decided I'd divorce my husband and I'd find something to do, which I came upon an opening as a school bus driver. So I was a school bus driver for Ventura for 4 years, and the three boys were old enough to go to school, but Billy was still small. And I had to get a sitter for him. But after a while, I graduated from the big bus to the little bus where we took specialty children to special schools like hearing, seeing. So they let me take little Billy with me on the bus. And like I say, I did that probably for 2 years. And then an opening came up in the health department in Ventura. And so I thought, well, I'm going to apply for that, which I did. And what happened, I was a junior public health nurse there. The WIC program started. That's the Women's, Infants, and Children's program run by the government, where they hand out food stamps to the pregnant women. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years, okay? And to earn a living, I've got to put in there, I did physicals for insurance companies early in the morning and late at night. So I have a little income besides just being a school bus driver, okay? And then the opening came to the health department, and I became a junior public health nurse. And that was nice because they had this big truck full of equipment, and we traveled to the different cities. Like we go to Piru, we go to Ojai, we go to Santa Paula, and we set up these clinics with public health nurse did their thing, and the WIC program did their thing, and then any other problems we were there to solve with people in the area, and that was very good. So I did that for a while, and then an opening came up for the hospital, working at the hospital. They were going to open up a new clinic on the avenue, and they were hiring nurses. So I applied for that, and I worked on the avenue. The doctor, that was run by the hospital. I worked with Dr. Balmer, and we treated people out there on the avenue that really needed help. And we saw quite a few patients there. And I worked there until they decided that they were closing down on all these clinics. I went back to the hospital, and I worked in, give me a minute to think.
Sure.
Emergency room, but it was, I'm trying to think of the name of what they called it. It was ex-emergency room where you did minor care, like colds, nosebleeds, anything minor to help the nurses in the emergency room themselves to take care of the major problems. So we did the minor problems in our area. And I worked there, and I finally decided to retire after 25 years. And I retired.
And what year was that? Was that 1984, around there?
Yes.
And then you
yes.
moved here to Camarillo?
And then I moved to, no, not 1984.
Oh.
It was 1970, wait a minute, 70, about 1980 I retired.
Oh, okay.
I lived in Ventura for that time. And then I decided I had a big house. I decided I needed something smaller and a little warmer climate, so I moved to Camarillo, California in 1984.
Okay.
Okay.
And even though you retired, you stayed active.
Even though I retired, I still volunteered at the library twice a week, and then I volunteered monthly for the blood drives at
Kaiser? Or?
At Kaiser. I was trying to think of their name.
Okay.
At Kaiser's Hospital. Until finally Kaiser's got their own group, so I didn't do that any longer, but I still continued to work at the library. In between that, I decided I was going to see the world.
Yeah.
And so I decided some of the hard-earned money that I worked hard for, I would see. So I decided to go overseas. I traveled Europe, I traveled Russia, China, you name it. I've been overseas 35 times.
New Zealand, yeah.
Yeah, England, all over. And so it came to the point where I was having a little medical problem. Should I tell them what I have? A heart attack?
Sure.
Okay, it came to the point where they said I had COPD in 19, I'm trying to think of the year. Anyway, they said I had COPD one day. So they rushed me to Pleasant Valley Hospital here, and I was treated for that. And so I was fine for about 8 or 9 months, and I had an attack, and they took me back to Pleasant Valley Hospital. In the run, they decided it wasn't COPD. I was having a heart attack, so I was treated for a heart attack. But I still continued to go overseas until I came back one time, and I was having a little time breathing, so they decided they'd put a pacemaker in. So I had a pacemaker put in. And ever since then, I've been fine, still working, still traveling. I enjoy being an escort for Thousand Oaks Senior Center. I do trips with them, and at the library, I take all of their trips, so I don't stay home. Anyway, I'm enjoying life.
Keeps you young.
Yes. And in September, I'm going to be 98 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Is there anything we missed in this wonderful life of yours?
Nothing I know of. I'm too nervous for you to think of.
Oh. So your daughter Laura lives in the same community, so you...
Oh, that Laura, yeah. Okay, I have a daughter that lives down the street from me, same community.
Keeps an eye on you.
She's the one that retired from Kaiser, and her husband is an old Navy pilot.
Wow.
Who's in the Navy. So whenever I need assistance or something, she runs down and helps me with it.
Well, you have a long tradition of military service, not just, from your father and your brothers and yourself, but, your in-laws. Yes, so it's we thank you for your service, Ann. And it's a great story. Thank you for sharing.
It was sometimes it was a hard life, but I didn't get depressed. I figured there's got to be something better in life, so I go ahead and I do it.
Right.
Just like I'm living here by myself, I take care of myself.
Right.
I have a beautiful house, a beautiful garden, yeah. And I love to drive. I still drive. I hit all the thrift stores that I can for excitement. I get too many things. Otherwise, that's it.
Good. And you're still so active. It's wonderful. It's something for us to look forward to.
Well, the thing was, I wasn't the type that I overlooked problems. I didn't get depressed. I figured a way out, and I was going to do it that way out. So I think that was part of doing everything I did in my whole life.
So it's a positive attitude.
Yeah,
it's
between
great.
death and divorce and all of that, I still decided there's something better in life, and I'm going to find it.